an agenda of what we're going to talk about. Chris is going to kind of kick us off with a Red 5 overview, and then we're going to turn it over to Craig. He's going to talk about Element for a bit, and then really we're going to have kind of a, almost a fireside chat, if you will, and just, Chris and Craig are going to have a nice dialogue on, kind of their respective practices and asking each other some really good questions. So kind of with that, I am going to turn it over to Chris Coleman.
Very good, Jeff. Thanks so much. And Craig, thank you as well. We're excited to be here with you guys. We think there's a lot that can come from what we talk about today for our viewers. So Red 5, we are about 15 years old. We're a privately held company, and we've developed our expertise from the typical 3-letter agencies in the government, the CIA, FBI, NSA, Secret Service, the military. And we took that experience and we applied it to private families. When I left the government, I went to work for a wealthy family and got established there and was answering questions for them about security. And then it turned into questions about, digital privacy, and then eventually helping them make sure they were resilient. In the end, I'm like, you know what, this should be what Red 5 does. So we've developed our company to do that. We're taking care of all kinds of clients around the world. And the bottom line is we make sure that bad things don't happen to good people. Next slide, Jeff. So our team, and I'll let Heather introduce herself, but our team, like I said, comes from 3-letter agencies. My background was CIA and special agent with the FBI, and I did that work for about 15 years, traveling to about 60 different countries. Heather, you want to talk to the group about your background? Audio, Heather.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Similar to Chris, my background is also former CIA. I've been with Red 5 now for just over 10 years, helping to grow the company, primarily in the security, privacy, and resiliency areas. Right now, I do a lot of work with our private family clients on protecting their personal information and ensuring that they have good cyber hygiene habits and know how to navigate our constantly changing world of interconnected devices and smart homes.
And we also have Jay Rooney and Tim Ward, not on the slide here, that help us tackle privacy, security, and resiliency offerings for our clients. So our experience is as we explained, from the 3-letter agencies, but we also bring in private cyber teams and physical security consultants and very specific engineers to tackle more unique requirements around safe rooms and safe havens, and then tackling obviously the network security issues with our friends from Element. We need very specific disciplines. Same thing with state security, same thing with investigations. We get into global investigations in other parts of the world. We have to bring in our partners, and we have to use their local expertise on the culture and the language to tackle those things. Internationally, we apply these processes, our investigative methods, and our assessment methodologies in those new environments. And we bring those methodologies to bear against international threats and international environments. So we tackle all that with our partners globally, and we help our clients get where they need to be. Next slide, Jeff. So again, we're protecting what matters most to clients. We want to be the last security company that our clients have to call. And we typically are. We're usually the second or third company they've called because the first couple can't tackle it. But our approach here is we know that private families and corporations need these 3 things: privacy, security, and resiliency. Privacy, you can really, you can have elements of privacy in place. You can be sequestered in your home. You can be at your second home at the beach and be away from people, but are you really digitally secure? Have you paid attention to what's going on with that network? What's going on the mobile devices that we take with each other and with ourselves everywhere we go? Are we paying attention to the threats in that new environment, whether it's international, or it's at your second home, or it's at your office, or as it is today, everyone's working from home? On the security front, it is the full spectrum of security offerings that we tackle. So it's everything from investigations and due diligence, physical security and digital security, getting into safe rooms, design engineering, investigations, risk management writ large for corporations, and helping them tackle those broad spectrum of threats. And then resiliency, we're talking about safe rooms, we're talking about safe havens, continuity plans, family readiness, personal resiliency, audits, and planning for evacuation and contingencies. So that's how we approach the 3 different service areas for our clients. And we'll move to the next slide.
Extremely robust, Chris. Thanks for covering that. Appreciate that. I think at this point, we're going to turn it over to Craig Sixta of Element Technologies.
Thanks so much, Chris and Heather, for joining us. A little side note before we get started here. It was very interesting the first time that I did an on-site job with Red 5. The team asked me what 3-letter agency I was from, and I'm like, sorry, I missed that opportunity. But I did have the opportunity of meeting General Nakasone, head of the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command, about a year back. And I did tell him the average age in U.S. Cyber Command is 23. I said, if you ever need a senior guy to step in and give a few more decades of experience, I'm happy to end my career that way. So for any 3-letter agencies that may catch wind of this on the internet, I'm wide open. So sorry, Jeff, but I'd go in a minute. So anyway, talking a little bit about Element. Element has been in business for just over about 30 years. And we really have 4 key branches of what we do. One is information technology, general IT. We come in and we either supplement IT teams in companies, or we become the IT team. With the transition to cloud, everything is in the cloud nowadays. We have many solutions. We'll design things all the way up from the servers hosted in data centers to software as a service. Many solutions there. Really where my bread and butter is the cybersecurity side of things. We do everything from, much like what Red 5 did, says protecting organizations, building strong solutions, layered defenses so that bad things don't happen. But we're also on the forefront when bad things do happen. We get calls from companies all over the country saying that they've been breached, something's happened. Sometimes they're not even sure what happened, and we step in. Interesting note on that, probably 5 years ago, it would have been a once a week, once every other week we would get those calls. And these days we are dealing with multiple incidences a day, whether it's phishing attacks, full ransomware breaches, you name it, but it's much, much more frequent than it used to be. So we do a lot with cybersecurity, forensics, e-discovery, that sort of thing. And then finally, enterprise content management, which is probably a little less familiar to most people, but what that is large-scale document repository. So working with government agencies, with law firms, with medical firms on how do they handle the millions of documents that they have, how do we keep them organized, make them searchable, and most importantly, keep them secure so that the right people are looking at them and the wrong people don't have access. Next slide, Jeff. And a little briefly here, I'm going to just talk in general about digital resilience and cybersecurity quickly, and then we'll move on to, as Jeff said, that fireside chat. And so one of the key things that I always talk with clients about is this. We need a change of perspective. The interesting part is, especially for those of you that are listening that are in the United States of America up until a few months ago, we live in a first world country where everything's safe. We don't have to worry about anything. And oftentimes we take that first world mentality with us into the cyber realm, and unfortunately it isn't true. I've worked with government agencies before. I've worked with local law enforcement that have looked right at me and said, you know, we can't catch you guys. And I said, you need to understand, I'm on the good side. I'm not one of the bad hackers. And goes, yeah, but we can't catch you guys. The fact of the matter is cybercrime is low risk. The people that are good at it oftentimes are out of the country actors. They're behind anonymized VPNs. They're hijacking other systems. Cybercrime really is low risk. The second part about that is that it's highly profitable. The fact of the matter is 10 years ago, cybercrime was done just for the thrill of it. Break into a network, see what you can find, get out there, maybe some industrial espionage, blackmail, bribery, that sort of thing. But with the advent of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, now we have an anonymous crime and an anonymous payment method. And because of that, cybercrime has just blossomed into a full-blown industry. The cybercrime tools are readily available. I don't recommend this, but you can go on YouTube and find out how to carry out a basic social engineering or a phishing attack. Access to the dark web is easy. You get on there and you can actually buy tools to run entire platforms of cybercrime. The next thing is that people and organizations are overly generous with their information online and on social media. We want to be friendly, and in many industries, we work with a lot of law firms. An attorney has to brag about how good they are and all the amazing things that they've done in order to get the business. Now, a bad actor will go in and take that information and turn it against them. One of the things that we do at Element is we will actually work with organizations and run simulated attacks so they know what it looks like, what it feels like, and what they can do to prevent it in the future. So an example of that is at one point we took an attorney, just distinguished attorney. He graduated from Notre Dame. He had done some amazing things in the community. I subscribed to the Notre Dame alumni newsletter, twisted it, sent him a fake one, and the fake one basically said, we're considering you for our Notre Dame Alumnus of the Year. Click here for more information. What do you think that attorney did? He clicked on it. He was excited. By the way, he was really upset afterwards with me. But the fact of the matter is, a bad actor, we've gone past the days of the Nigerian prince wanting to get his ex-wife or his former wife wanting to give you $50 million. They're extremely targeted, and there's so much information that can be used to attack people. So consider that when you're putting things online. So we need to step back to our modern perspective of accountability, passivity, and safety, and realize that it is a different world when we're talking about cybersecurity and cybercrime. Next slide, Jeff. So the threat is real. Per Gartner, 114 billion US was spent on cybersecurity countermeasures in 2018. But that same year, it's estimated that 66% of companies experienced a breach. Now, here's the fact of the matter. If you're listening to this and you're working in an organization and you say, well, we haven't been breached in 2 or 3 years, the dwell time, that's what we say, how long a bad actor's been in a system, is coming on just short of a year now. It used to be that it was a get in, get out crime. Grab what you can and get out. We see it now where if they compromise the CEO's email address, they may sit on it for 200 days watching behavior, watch how wire transfers are happening, gathering social security information or HR information, pulling that all in, and then doing a much more effective attack. And then we have to have a reasoned response to cybercrime. Here's the fact of the matter, and I'm sure Chris will be talking about this later as well. If you live your life terrified of the next attack, if every little blip that happens on your computer you feel is somebody that's trying to get in and attack you, it's debilitating. You can't live that way. You have to have a reasoned response. Build great defenses and then trust those defenses. Be on alert, but just be reasonable. Okay, and then we have to stop shaming victims of cybercrime. This is probably one of my most important things I talk about. If you watch TV shows, if you watch commercials, we always saw those videos of, the person in the cubicle clicking on the virus and then hanging their head in shame because they did that. And everybody's like, how could you click on that? We need to remember when it comes to cybercrime, it's still a crime. There's still a criminal. There is still a victim. And we need to remember who's who in this case. We wouldn't ever do this if Heather came in and said, I was out at the ball game last night, which we don't go to ball games anymore. But if she was, and she said, I got mugged on my way home, Chris would never tell her, I can't believe you parked your car in that parking lot. You had it coming. But we actually do that to victims of cybercrime. We say, I can't believe you were so stupid that you clicked on that phishing attack. The fact of the matter is the crimes are much better nowadays, but we still have victims. One of the most important reasons that we need to remember this as well is when victims expect to be shamed, they don't report the crimes. I had a large real estate company that called me out of the blue. I happened to be in Austin, Texas on a job, and they said, we'd really love to have a security audit. And I went, well, sounds good. And went through my job down there, got up. About a week later, they called and they said, we really, really want a cybersecurity audit. And I asked them, did something happen? Go, no, nothing happened. We're fine. Said, it feels to me like something happened. What happened? Talk to me. And it turned out that somebody hacked into their email system, switched their template for their escrow payments for houses. And for nearly 2-3 weeks, escrow payments were going to a fake bank account. They didn't know how it happened, what happened, or why it was happening. But as soon as they told me, I knew exactly what it was and how to stop it. This could have been stopped in an hour as opposed to 2 or 3 weeks. The other thing is I've been fortunate enough to work with the FBI a fair amount. And I've got people that I've worked with there that will tell me within 24 hours, they can at least freeze the money or get it back in a fraudulent wire transfer. If it's 48 hours, we're too late. Time is of the essence. Next slide, Jeff. And then passwords. They're the weakest link in the chain. Keep going, Jeff. Here's the problem with passwords. Data breaches are becoming more and more common. Every day we're hearing about data breaches. The fact of the matter is you can have the greatest password in the world, but if LinkedIn, Yahoo, Gmail, whoever gets compromised, that password's out in the wild. People do a really poor job of protecting their passwords in general. A lot of times I can walk into an office and either find the post-it note or find the notebook that's got it written in there. And then here's the bad one. There was a statistic that came out this, I think it was about a year ago, that said that about 10% of people use the same password for everything. And the average person has about 90 sites on the internet. So 8% of people use it for everything. The scarier stat was about 85% of people use the same 2 or 3 passwords or an iteration of it for everything. So if we can find a password in a data breach, all too often we can just start, it's called credential stuffing, jumping into everything else and finding out what else we can get into. And this is why you see phishing attacks that are trying to get your Netflix password or your Disney Plus password as opposed to your bank account password. Because if I send a phishing attack to Chris saying your bank account's been suspended, please put in your username and password, he's on high alert. If I say your Netflix account's been suspended, his first thought is, great, what did the kids do this time? He logs in, everything looks fine, he moves on with his day, and now I'm trying to get into his bank account. And here's a big one too. The last one there, and we'll talk about it on this slide, forced passwords create bad password hygiene. I see this all too often. If I can find out that someone's password was summer 16, odds are we're in summer 20 right now, and I bet their password is summer 20. Iteration, forced passwords change that. So here's the solution. Multi-factor authentication. You've probably heard of it before. If you are not using it on every system it can be used on, you need to do it. Multi-factor takes 2 or more factors of something you know. We're already using these passwords. Something you are, it could be a fingerprint, and then something you have, a smart card, something like that, a smartphone, if you've used Google with the rolling codes. Here's the difference. I tricked Chris into giving me his bank account password. If he has multi-factor authentication and he's got a 6-digit rolling code, now I have to break into Chris's house and I need to get that rolling code from him. I've just eliminated the entire world of hackers and limited to somebody that's willing to go to a great deal of risk to get into that bank account. So there's a huge difference with that. Next slide, Jeff. So summary really quickly here. Enable multi-factor authentication on everything you can. If you're not sure how to do this, there's a video right on Elements page. Just go under About and look at videos that I will walk you through how to set it up for Amazon. Most people are on Amazon. Use unique passwords, store them securely. Here's one that a lot of people don't think about. Don't use your actual information for password recovery questions. I can go on the internet and find out who all of your relatives are, your birth date, your former phone numbers, what cars you've owned. All of that is readily available. Make up a fake profile for yourself and start using that and just document it someplace. Deactivate old accounts. The reason for this, going back to the social engineering concept, is a lot of us had MySpace accounts. Not many people deactivated them. Same with Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts were compromised a few years ago. You can go in and see all the private messages that were in the Google Hangouts. So I can look at private conversations between husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, that look for information that can be used to manipulate someone. And then finally, reformat or destroy old devices. Old devices don't go to your kids or your relatives. You have to destroy the hard disks in them because that contains information that even if they're reformatted, all too often can be recovered.
Great. Thanks,
So
Craig.
a lot of information really quickly there.
Appreciate that. So at this point, we're going to kind of move on to the discussion between really Craig and Chris, the two of you, just kind of get some collaboration going here. So Craig, why don't you kind of kick it off? I know you've got some questions for Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my main ones, especially with the advent of COVID-19, the social unrest that we're experiencing, is we hear so much about resilience today and how important it is to be resilient. So Chris, can you tell us a little bit about how you work with families and companies to become more resilient?
Yeah, absolutely. I talking about all the things you just mentioned, COVID, is on the forefront of everything right now. You can just look to the headlines and see, where private families and corporations are trying to figure out how to get through this. And resilience is really all about bouncing back from adversity. It's the ability to flex. It's the ability to come back, to recover from misfortune or from a challenge. And what we're looking at now in today's world is the pandemic. We're looking at civil unrest. We saw early on about the protests, but now we're seeing in Portland every night and now in other cities. And, now we got these things, bubbling around the internet, right? So it's not exactly the best source of information, but you've got, the murder hornets, and now they're talking about aliens landing. So I'm not sure what 2020 still has in store for us, but Corporations and private families are looking for ways to get through this, to bounce back. Some of them have done well. That we've had a real world test of our continuity of operations plans, our business continuity plans, and that's all legitimate. But are they now ready for the next wave? Are they ready for what may happen here in the fall? What's going to happen with the elections? We don't know. But we can work with families, and we've stepped through different challenges with them. We've actually built out a series of training and offerings around resilience for executives and leaders. And what that is it's an element of understanding what they're trying to achieve, where they want to go. It's an understanding of what do they have in place to be resilient today. We do that through an audit. We can help the families with an audit, private family offices with an audit. We can help corporations with an audit. Let's do an after action on that COOP plan, on that business continuity plan. Let's see how that went. And let's be honest with each other about how that went. We can get into resiliency planning. We can do personal resilience plans. We can do family readiness plans. We can help corporations with business preparedness. So all of those things are really important, that we need to understand the reality around what's going on with the family and with the businesses. We're also really being pioneers in this concept of resiliency training. Our real training classes are being prepared to be rolled out virtually, and our face-to-face training for real takes us into really unique environments. We're talking about training around home defense, self-defense, medical challenges, vehicular travel, all kinds of challenges around real, and we can get a little bit more into that. And all of this is being aggregated really when we start talking about it in the book I'm writing. So I'm getting into a book on resiliency. That's first draft is done, and we'll hopefully see that published here in early October.
Excellent. And so, yeah, you talked about that book a little bit before. What are some of the key takeaways going to be from that book?
Yeah, I'm excited to write the book. Heather wrote a book for Red 5 earlier this year on Shield Your Privacy, which touched on a lot of the tips that you guys have talked about today. And so that was our premier offering there on the book, sort of thought leadership. And now the second book is going to be a resiliency book. And it's really, the premise here is that resilience is based on the individual. Everything about bouncing back comes back from the individual, the person themselves. And we're all trying to be resilient. We all want to do really one thing, and we all have one goal in life, and that is we want to survive and we want to thrive, right? We want to get through the next challenge. We want to make sure that we're successful, that our families are taken care of, and that our business is thriving. So the one goal for everybody is to survive and thrive. The other key element here is that we know that through the years that there are really three key units we have to take care of. Three key units that have to be resilient. So you have the individual, you have your family, and then you have your business or your livelihood. So each of us wants to be resilient in our own regard as an individual, but we want to make sure we take care of our families. And that could be just the nuclear family, or it could be the extended family. And then lastly, it's our livelihood. You may be a founder of a business, you may be a corporate executive of a business, or maybe you're just working in a business yourself, and that is your livelihood. But we want them all to be resilient. And then what we've learned over the years from private families, and we've learned over the years from corporate units and from our time in the government, is that really there are 5 pillars to resiliency. And what we're talking about here are the 5 pillars that support those 3 units. And we're trying to achieve the one goal, right? So 5-3-1 is this concept we've played out in the book. The 5 pillars are awareness. What are we talking about with awareness? We're talking about our self-awareness, being real about who you are, about what your capabilities are, what your limitations are. Understanding having awareness around others that you work with, others that live in your home, others that are your peers in the industry. What's going on in your neighborhood? What are your neighbors up to? What's your community up to in the middle of this pandemic? What's your awareness level? And then we get into financial awareness with both the family and how healthy are you? And then we get into security and digital awareness and business awareness. So are you paying attention to those key indicators around your business? Are you paying attention to what's going on now that you're working from home on your digital network? And the bottom line on awareness is base all your decisions on reality. Don't focus on social media. Don't focus on unreliable streams of information. Get your information from a reliable source. On the mindset side, which is our second pillar, it's really about being positive. It's really about being in a growth mindset. We're trying to avoid catastrophic thinking here, like the world is going to end. We're never going to make it. I'm just not going to be good enough to get through this. Or my business is failing. I can't believe I got to this point. Those are catastrophic thoughts and not something that we would ever want to dwell on. We want to go down the path of a winning approach. We want to go down the path, what you said earlier, we wouldn't want to be, condemning of our colleagues if they had a problem with a digital problem or a physical problem. We'd want to build them back up. We have a growth mindset. We have a positive, constructive mindset. And then what we used to teach at the agency and the bureau is this survival mindset. You get into trouble, you get into a gunfight, you get into a tough spot overseas, don't give up, fight through it. And that's the mindset we want to see, is that positive mindset. On the fitness front, this is really about physical, digital, emotional, and mental fitness. Are you flexible? Do you have the endurance to get through these things? We're not talking about how many miles you run or how much weights, how much you can lift in the gym. This is really about flexibility. It's about endurance. It's about well-being and getting through these troubling times. You can easily go down the path of depression in this environment, pandemic and civil unrest and all the negative news on TV. But are you fit? Are you operationally fit in your business? Can you get through this? Are you agile? So that's what we're talking about on the fitness front. The fourth pillar is skills. So we're talking about really some martial skills. And we're talking about some skills that can help you get through these challenges. We really want to understand planning, and are you prepared for these kinds of challenges? So what's your shelter in place plan? We've seen this now with pandemics and stay-at-home orders. So what's your shelter in place? What is your evacuation plan if you have to leave the urban environment and go to your safe haven somewhere else? Can you light a fire? Can you change a tire? I mean, these things have been talked about in the news, but the reality is, we need to get back to some of these basic martial skills of preparedness. Some of the things we might have seen in the Scouts, or some of these things we might have seen in different community environments, boys and girls clubs. There are some really good martial skills out there that need to be redeveloped in our society. And then we get into medical training and planning and getting into things around what Heather's book talked about, which is digital skills. Are you securing your devices in your network? And then the fifth pillar, which is really important, and we cannot ignore this, and that is relationships. With relationships, what we're talking about here is faith, family, your spouse, neighbors, your community. What's going on in these environments? Because your industry peers can help you, right? You can turn to your spouse for support. You can turn to your family support, but you may not even know your neighbors in this day and age. Get out and know your neighbors, understand what they may bring to the resilience solution here. There may be a lot going on in your neighborhood that provides you support element. So all those 5 pillars, awareness, mindset, fitness, skills, and relationships are really key. And then those support the 3 key units, which takes you to the one goal of survive and thrive. That's what the book's about. And we look forward to getting that out here, hopefully in the fall.
That's really good, Chris. Thank you. So as you conclude here, do you have any practical tips for our audience today to just help their families, their businesses be more resilient?
Yeah, on the awareness side, I say the number one thing is find good, reliable sources of information. There is such a debate out there right now about, who's spinning what story to what direction, whether it's left or right, it doesn't matter. You've got to find good, reliable sources of information. I like to rely on clear research by reliable institutions. We like to rely on ground truth from somebody who's been there in that city to tell us about what the conditions are. So I would absolutely rely on reality to make decisions and good sources of information. Be positive on the mindset side. Let's avoid those thinking traps. Let's keep a positive mindset. On the fitness side, take time to get outside. Get outside, get some fresh air, get away from the 4 walls of the home that you've been stuck in for 4 months. And make sure that on the fitness side for your business that you're cash flow positive and you're getting rid of those excess costs. On the skills front, this is a really great time. You're in your home. You've got maybe some additional time. Get some additional skills. There's tons of training out there available. But let's do a self-assessment. What is it you need? What is it you haven't done? When's the last time you took a CPR class? When's the last time you took a basic first aid class? So self-assess where your skills are, and you can pick some of those up while we're all here working from home. And then lastly, like I said earlier, go back to your neighborhood. Let's find out what resources are in your neighborhood. If you don't know your neighbors, go meet them. You may need them in the next time of civil unrest, or maybe our supply chain is disrupted again, but get to know your neighbors and understand what's available in your neighborhood and those kinds of resources.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much. One more thing before we move on to questions, Chris, that you have of Craig. Heather, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit here, but I'd like to get your take on this. I know we're both parents. I know you're very passionate about how all of this relates to being a parent. Maybe just talk, for a few minutes about that.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. As you noted, we both are parents, both dealing with teens and preteens. And I think one of the biggest things right now, as families are at home with their children, most learning from home, working from home, I say first and foremost, have a conversation about family sharing guidelines. This is really important. Most families may have some sort of, well, you can't go on this website or you can't go on that app. But they don't ever really talk about the why behind that. And they don't really explain to their children what it is okay to share and what it is not okay to share. We recommend sitting down, having the conversation, not just with your children, but also with your parents. If you have other close family or close friends that are like family, have a conversation with those closest to you about what it is okay to share about your family, your personal situation, and what it's not okay to share. Once you have that conversation, since that really touches on the kind of the essence of the who would be doing the sharing, we would then encourage everyone to then talk about what security and privacy settings they have on their devices or on their apps. So once you talk with the who and the people, talk about the devices and the software and the different programs you use. Again, if it's okay to share, photos of a family vacation after you've gotten back from the vacation, who can you share it with? Can you have private settings on your devices that enable you to share with friends or friends of friends, or are they public settings? These are all things to consider, I think, in this day and age where it's so easy to take a photo or take a screenshot or to, very quickly send a text, not realizing where that information goes after it's out of your hands. The one thing that we see a lot with families, sometimes, you have kids or grandparents, well, I didn't realize, I shared with just my friends. Well, that's great. But if your friends took a screenshot and then they shared with their friends, you can see how very quickly this gets out of control. I think the biggest thing right now as you're home with your family and extended family is have the conversation, establish those sharing guidelines, and then talk about the devices and the apps and the programs we're all using day in, day out.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. It's great insight on that topic. Chris, you have some questions for Craig.
I do. Craig, and you live this, and you and Jeff both live this every day, the cyber threats that are out there looming. And we hear a lot about the dark web and what evil things happen on the dark web. So what can we do? What can our listeners do to keep their information off the dark web?
Great question, Chris. Before I answer that, I actually want to dovetail onto what Heather said about kids. One other thing that you should really be doing with your kids, don't be hovering over them, but participate with them in what they're sharing online. See how they behave, because kids don't have a security mindset. And I don't know that they really need to be paranoid about security. But as Heather said, sharing vacation photos afterwards, all it takes is a kid in a public forum saying, yeah, we're going on vacation for the week. To a bad actor, that's our house will be empty for a week and is available to be robbed. In the same vein, I was watching my kids about a month ago playing a game called Fortnite, which you're probably all familiar with. And one of the kids that was playing, his username that was hovering over his head was his full name. I don't know who that kid was, but the name was unique enough. I guarantee you I could have found out exactly who they were on the internet, and they were 11 years old. Parents should be watching for that, because especially with kids talking with people on the internet, which I don't recommend, they've got their actual name there. That's bad. But to go on to that, talking about the dark web, the dark web's got this stigma that it's this mysterious place and that it's impossible to get to. The fact of the matter is, it is on the internet. You need a couple tools to get there, but when you do get there, it's anonymized. It's sitting behind a system that basically all but guarantees anonymization unless you're doing something wrong. And it is a bad place. There are some absolutely awful things on there. And when we talk about keeping our information off the dark web, there's some things we can do. And one of them is be careful who you're sharing your information with. If you have to create a username and password to log into a site just because you're curious about something behind it, or you want a news article or something, you should probably be using a throwaway email account and a password that isn't tied to any of your real information. I'd be even concerned about sharing my real name if it's something that I'm not going to actually be using, because all of that eventually gets tied back to you. And the biggest challenge with the dark web is we can't always control when our information is compromised when we've shared it with others. A perfect example of this is I worked recently with a financial firm that was compromised. We're still working through the extent of it, but this financial firm has all the bank account information, social security numbers, private information on thousands of people. And that could end up on the dark web. None of those people did anything wrong. And remember, the financial firm's the victim in this. They did a fairly good job with their security, but a bad actor got in. So as important as it is to try to keep our information off the dark web, it's just as important to be paying attention to what may be on the dark web, identifying it and mitigating it as soon as we know. And there are some really good tools out there that can help you say, okay, my social security numbers just showed up on the dark web, or my username and password. We have a tool for many of our clients where the minute that we've identified that a username and password has been found on the dark web, one of our security team tests it to make sure it's valid. Then we're contacting the client and saying, we just found these credentials. Where else are you using them? We've got to change them right away. And so knowing what's there is almost as important as trying to keep it off the dark web. But it's just the nature of where we're at nowadays.
No, absolutely. And it is a place where lots of things happen and not a lot good happens there. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
From where we came from and the government, obviously encryption was always important, right? So we were always operating on encrypted phones, on encrypted networks, et cetera. And now we hear today about encryption. So can you talk a little bit about how important it is to encrypt your phones and your computers and our clients' devices in today's environment?
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's a personal device or a work device, both Windows and Mac from the PC operating system have very simple tools to encrypt your entire device. And from a system compromised or a breach incident perspective, I just had a large engineering firm tell me one of their laptops was stolen. The very first thing we did was we verified that the encryption was on it and it was up to date. Non-event. Somebody's got a laptop. They'll probably rip the hard drive out of it, put a new one in. But that information cannot be compromised, at least not in the next few hundred years. That's the difference between if it wasn't encrypted, that becomes a nightmare scenario for that firm that may cost them millions of dollars. And I've seen that side of it as well. So encryption is very easy on the PC side of things. This is an argument to keep your systems up to date, keep the security patches up to date, be paying attention. If you're still running on a Windows 7 machine, it's time to upgrade. If your laptop or desktop is 5 or 6 years old, it doesn't have the modern security tools in it. This goes for mobile devices as well. More and more, we are putting all of our information on our mobile devices, and they can be a bit more difficult to encrypt and protect. One example, unfortunately, is with the Apple devices, which, by the way, I normally recommend Apple for security. They do a great job, but there is a hardware flaw in everything from the iPhone 5 all the way to the iPhone 10, that if I can physically get my hands on it, I can bypass all of the encryption. Same goes for, I think, the iPad 2 to one of the most modern iPads. They fixed it with the iPhone 11, but if you're really, really concerned about security and encryption, you probably shouldn't have an iPhone 5 to 10. So this is a great argument right now to go out and get an 11 or wait a couple of months for the 12. On that note, thinking about mobile devices as well and physical devices, laptops, physical security is just as important. Keep those devices on you, protect them. This myth that somebody's going to hack into your phone remotely and steal all the information, that may be possible for nation states or very, very well-versed people, but by and large, that doesn't happen. Usually devices are just physically stolen, the information's taken off them and they're put back. Or one example may be, I've got a whole box full of old phones. So I see Chris at the beach. He's got an iPhone 8. I just walk up to him while walk up to his beach chair while he's in the water, take his iPhone 8 out of his case, put my broken one in, smash the screen, leave it in the sand. Chris gets back from the water, looks and goes, my phone fell, it broke, what's the deal? He has no idea that he doesn't even have his phone anymore. And at that point, I take my time, I get in. There's something called Apple Keychain if he was using that. Now I've got all of his passwords. It's a really bad situation. So think physical security on your mobile devices. Give it to somebody you trust if you can't hang on to it. But if you're traveling, if you're doing anything, keep it on your person and know where it is at all times. That's absolutely critical.
Yeah, Craig, I'm really glad Element's on our side. We're paying attention to all the physical security, but you guys are obviously right there with us on the digital side. And that really takes me to the next question, which is something again, we came up through the industry with, which was secure communications. We always had that. It dovetails in encryption, but for our listeners out there, our viewers, how do they ensure that someone isn't listening to their emails? Isn't listening to their conversations, isn't reading their emails or reading their texts? We give them a lot of recommendations, but I'd love to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as secure communication, one of the first things that I ask people is, what are you communicating about? Is it something that you would be concerned about if it got out in the public realm or if some bad actors got information? By and large, if you're just talking to family and friends, using your cell phone's just fine. But you may have conversations that you don't want to be overheard. Now, one of the things that I will say on that is, for any of you that have smart home devices, Alexas, Amazon Echoes, Google Home devices, be paying attention to the fact that those are always listening. And mine's listening to me right now, actually. So the fact of the matter is, on an Amazon Alexa, my Amazon Alexa is now telling me about the Google Home because it heard me. That is epic. So perfect example. But here's the neat part from a security perspective. Huge kudos to Amazon and Google. There is a button on the top of the Amazon Alexa, and there's a switch on the back of the Google Home that shut off the microphone, and it's been verified that is a physical shut off. So it's not something where you press it, it turns red, and you just have happy, good feelings, but it's still collecting information. It's actually physically disabling the microphone. I wish cell phones had this, and they don't. And so be aware that if you have your cell phone on you and you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody and you don't want to be overheard, that's where there's things called Faraday bags that you may want to have one. You slide your phone in and it kills all the signals so that it can't be listened to. So be paying attention to that when you're having conversations that you don't want to be overheard. Now, when it comes to actually using your phone or email to communicate, one of the things I recommend is there's an application called Signal. It's open source. The security community is constantly vetting it, but you can have video conversations, phone conversations, and text conversations, and they are highly encrypted, and they can be set to delete immediately after you're having the conversation. So if you're having something that you need to be highly confidential, this is what we actually use to communicate back and forth with Red 5, use something like that because it eliminates the history behind the communication. Something like that could be absolutely essential. One of the things I always tell people is email should be your last resort for secure communication. It is so easy to compromise email. It's so easy to deliver payloads into people's systems right through email. Email is not a good choice. Teams is better than it. Slack is better than it. Instant messaging is better than it. Email should just be your last choice if you're doing anything secure, unless you've got an encrypted solution on email.
Great tips. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you all. That was a great conversation. We do have a question here that came in, and this is for both of you. Chris, we'll start with you. Do you find that people come to you for help before or after an incident? Like, maybe share some examples of, obviously you got to protect your clients, but I'm sure you can just generally share some examples on, what are some horror stories that you've come across, between you and Heather, just that you've had to help clients with and overcome them, and, what would have been, avoided? What could they have done, to be a lot more proactive, I guess, in that regard?
So I'll give a couple of answers to that. So one is on the investigation side, we do get proactive requests. A lot of times investigations start when something's gone bad. But on the proactive side, we have had affluent families approach us, and they're looking for, we're going to go down this path for philanthropy. We're going to give this money to this charity, or now we have a daughter that's going to get married, and she started to date this person from another country. We really want to understand what's going on with this individual or with this charity. And so from a proactive perspective, those groups approach us and they said, what can we find out from a due diligence perspective? Is this charity actually what they say they purport to be? What they don't want is that Washington Post test that, they hit the headline the next day that they just gave $1 million to, what might be a terrorist front in Africa that we thought was an orphanage. So we do some background for philanthropic reasons. We'll do some support for due diligence, trying to help companies before they put people on their boards. People will approach us, and we have a very unique and a very effective way of doing diligence in a proactive manner to understand who these people are. You know, are they politically exposed? Are they involved in financial dealings that are questionable? And are they really who they say they are? Those investigations are proactive, and that helps them avoid problems in the future. And we encourage, you know, wealth managers and investment managers, as well as private families and family offices, to do those kinds of proactive. And then you obviously get the knee-jerk reactions. You know, the sky is falling, and I just had this happen on the security front. Or, you know, Heather, you probably have a great story on the privacy side for us responding to a privacy issue. Just a matter really of, do you want to share that with this group?
Sure. On the privacy side, we typically get we get proactive and reactive calls. Typically the reactive calls is similar to what Craig was talking about earlier, where something's happened. People have been hacked, their account's been compromised, they've received emails, you know, enticing or asking them to transfer funds, blackmailing them, other things like that. Those are very reactive. On the proactive front, we've worked with individuals in the past where they have founded companies, or they're senior executives in companies, and their companies are about to IPO. And they know that post-IPO, there's gonna be a lot of attention on them as individuals and also their families. So they've come to us to ask, like, can you, one, find out what's already out there online, open source, deep and dark web, about me and my family? And then once we know that, can you then help, you know, me or help us keep that information private, or as private as it can possibly be? You know, they don't want some either news elements or items about their family to be on page 1 of a Google search about them. So we can work with our team to, you know, really help augment the good news stories and then suppress the items they don't want to be on page 1 or 2. With the internet, you can't necessarily delete things that have already been posted, but you can certainly work with the algorithms and suppress. So maybe on Google page 10 versus Google page 1. But we do try to be very proactive. We try to get all of the families that we work with to think in that proactive mindset. What are we doing today that could affect us down the road, be it a year, 3 years, 5 years, or even once the kids are grown and now applying to college or other things like that. So we work very closely on the proactive side with families. We'd much rather see them come to us thinking kind of, what would happen if I do this today? What happens down the road? Versus the, oh my gosh, you know, something just happened. It's 10 o'clock at night. I need you to help right now. And we can respond to both. We definitely like kind of the educating piece and the let's be proactive and think about this first.
Thank you both. Craig, how about your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's interesting on the cybersecurity side of things. Clients we already have relationships with that understand it are very good about saying, we're putting in this new financial platform. Can you vet the security on it? We're working with a new vendor. Can you vet this, or a new employee, that sort of thing. But by and large, our relationships with clients often start with a breach, a compromise, an event that's happened. It's the unfortunate nature of cybersecurity that it's this ethereal concept that unless you've experienced it, it feels like it's an imaginary thing. The bad guys really aren't out there to get me. It's not a real threat. Most of us, frankly, if we're in an urban environment, walking at night through an alley to get to our car, are on a heightened sense of awareness of, I don't want to get mugged right now. But the chance of getting mugged versus the chance of falling for a phishing attack are minimal. Everybody has been attacked with a phishing attack, and many of us have fallen for it. I did a international talk about, I'm thinking it was in January. It's been a long year, my goodness. But I'm pretty sure through that, somebody got my name and wanted to prove a point. And what they did is they actually hacked my daughter's college account and was communicating with me as my daughter, using the conversations we usually use, and just about got me to fall for putting a payload on Element System. I was one click away before I stepped back and went, wait a minute, I'm paranoid. What am I doing here? And I called my daughter. That's what you should do. Anytime you get an email, call the person, say, you really send this to me? And she goes, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And at that point I said, get on the phone. But unfortunately, it's usually an event that predicates it. And here's the unfortunate part with companies and with individuals. we tend to make our worst decisions in the middle of a crisis if we haven't planned and thought about it ahead of time. And I see that all the time where I'll walk into the war room and people are just in panic mode. They're more concerned about how do we protect the company and how do we look good, as opposed to how do we stop the bad guy, protect our clients' information, and get out of this. And so one of the things I love doing with companies and individuals is something called tabletop exercises, where we'll sit down and I'll create a scenario. I'll just say that, okay, law firm, you just had a client call you and inform you that they just found their information on the dark web and they think it's a hack from you. What do we do? And I start building the narrative and talking about basically a worst case scenario and having people react in real time. And once they start getting a feel for that, they start thinking the right way, so that when that event does happen, they have a plan and it goes so much more smoothly. And it's actually fun to be in a company that's got a good solid incident response plan when an event happens, because it is a thing of beauty. They handle it so much better as opposed to the catastrophes we've seen.
Thank you both on that. And then there's one more question here, which is, I think a great question at the end, just to sort of wrap this all up. Maybe, talk through, Chris and Craig, how really Red 5 and Element work together. Maybe just some common projects that we're working on together, how best, companies and high net worth individuals can kind of utilize our services.
Yeah, I think what we've seen on our side is we really approach things from a holistic perspective, right? So clients come to us and like Heather was saying and Greg was saying, we really like the clients they understand security. They're making good value decisions about security. I mean, Red 5 is never going to be the cheapest. We're never going to be the most expensive. But the reality is we're the best overall solution for most challenges that come in. And that is because we do take a holistic approach. We're dealing with things that are man-made. We're dealing with things that are natural hazards, natural disasters. We're dealing with the individual. We're dealing with the family. We're dealing with the business. So we are very holistic in our approach. We think about the assets you're trying to protect. We think about the threats that exist and that are likely against your assets you're trying to protect. And then we deal with the vulnerabilities and we give you reasonable approaches to manage the risk. So whether it's a private family office or if it's a corporation, we approach it holistically. And I think that's where we tag team nicely with Element, right? We know where we are strong. We know where we need to bring a very unique expertise in. So we'll come in and we'll give that very holistic approach and we'll give them the whole picture. So now they can make a decision that's based on all of the good information that's available. They're not basing it on a book they read. They didn't stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night. The reality is that they now have the right information from them. They're dealing with likelihood, not panic mode. And now they can come in and deal with it. And we'll help with the physical. We'll deal with investigations and due diligence and physical. And then we team very nicely with Element when we come in and say, we're gonna approach this. And Element's gonna handle the digital. They do that really well. We handle the physical and the holistic assessment really, really well. And then tag team together, the mitigations that come up are then prioritized. This is important on the physical side. This is important on open source. This is what we're gonna really need to be doing on the digital side. And we'll rank them together as a team and come up with a prioritized list. And it might be that the top 5 things you need to do on the physical side need to happen today. But then there's 14 things on the digital side that need to happen. And we're going to break those out by priority as well. And in some instances, the digital are far more important to tackle immediately than the physical is. So it's really the approach there that where we work together, we understand each other's strengths, and we can bring the client the best overall solution together.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. You nailed it. Talking about the holistic approach, we really think about this concept of defense in depth or layered security, that the threat actor is always going to look for the weakest point to attack someone. And the physical and the digital are both highly important. I think of situations where a client is concerned about a physical attack or a physical compromise, and Red 5 working with them on, take alternative routes, think about the physical security of your car. What are you going to do in the event? And then from the digital perspective, is your calendar secure? Is your personal assistant's calendar secure? Can somebody compromise your digital realm to know when and where you are going to be to make that physical attack that much easier? And so it really does have to be a holistic approach of looking at it from every angle, because you can do a great job on the physical and they'll just get you through the digital, or on the flip side, you're thinking all about your digital attacks and somebody just walks up and takes what they want. And so it has to be approached from both angles. And it's been a great partnership. It's really, I think, benefited clients well.
Absolutely, I echo that. Well, I think that wraps up our presentation, our discussion for today. We're going to finish a few minutes early, so we'll give everybody back the rest of your day here. We thank everyone for joining us. Heather, Chris, Craig, thank you all for speaking today. Great discussion, and hope everyone has a wonderful day.